Hi everyone, I am talking to you from my car. This was supposed to be a fancy video that my IT department at my college was going to make for me, but then this pandemic happened and now we're on day 16 of a quarantine and my house is suddenly full with my two grown kids back with us, so this car is the quietest place. So I thought I'd read you some poems from here. A few things first, though. I want to thank the Pennsylvania Center for the book for this honor. I am just really amazed to be able to think about my poem being on so many posters around the state of Pennsylvania. And I hope that soon we'll be able to come out of our quarantines and see all of these posters in public places. The other thing I want to tell you is I'm just going to do this in one take, so if I mess up, I apologize in advance. I will do the best that I can. So there's a TV show that's called Comedians Riding in Cars with Coffee or something like that. Well, I don't have any coffee, but I do have hand sanitizer. So this is going to be riding in cars with poets and hand sanitizer. Maybe I should say riding in cars with poets and Purell for the alliteration. All right, here goes. I'm going to start with the poem that received this honor. It's called Vow. Somewhere a child pretends to sleep, eyelids fluttering in the nightlight's flannel glow, while an office worker feigns wakefulness in his cubicle, startling at each chirping phone. Someone is catching a ball. Someone is catching her breath. Someone, somewhere, is lingering between this world and the next. Things come and go. Things go and go. Because of the ocean, the sky is blue. Because of death, we learn how to live. Or do we? Someone, somewhere, is saying, I do. This next poem is called Dear Fringe, and if you imagine it, the poem is being addressed to the word fringe. So think about what you think of with the word fringe. Jangle on a flapper girl's dress, yes, but also her bangs and lashes. Grass in the pasture not yet grazed or flattened. Shop talk, small talk. Ropey belly fur on a river-loving dog. A marginal student's marginal doodles. Tears. The line of plastic caps my grandmother twisted on toothpaste tubes for 40 hours a week and 40 years. The receiving line. Handshake, 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 kiss. This. It's interesting to think about those lines, handshakes and kisses, when we're doing so much social distancing right now. This poem is called The World is a Scented Handkerchief, after Shakir the Aibi. The world is a moonlit rib, a disheveled vigil, a shackled clock. The world is greedy geography, empty bells, unripened tides, breathless shells on a desert beach. The world is a newborn nun. The world is a fluttering gun. The world is extinguished chance, listless ships, bleeding thieves. It is clouded vowels, the taste of sound on the tongue of a young girl. The world is every word unfurled. These next poems I want to read are from a series of demi-sonnets that I wrote. That's a form that I devised. And the basic form, it's 7 lines, and then each poem ends with either a full rhyme or a near rhyme. So they're called demi-sonnets. This one is This Just In. The breaking news is there's no breaking news. No one died. There were no fires or bribes or lies. No buildings exploded or imploded. No one voted. Nothing happened today. It's a disaster. Let us pray. I think we could all use a little less breaking news right about now. Offsprung. Your children don't choose you. They usually don't want you to die. They fall in love with not needing you. They wear dark glasses so they can study the horizon when you think they're looking you in the eye. Another demi-sonnet. This one's called Word Problem. If a vehicle is traveling 55 miles an hour on a 400-mile trip, and a 4th-grade girl with a tear-shaped mole on her left cheek factors in 2 rest stops and a lunch break on a rickety fishing pier, how many hours will it take her to realize she's an artist, not an idiot? How many years? This demi-sonnet's called Roots. Spatula, from the Latin spatha, flat tool or weapon for turning, hurling, prying. Tongue, from Dongwa, Proto-Indo-European, tongue, flat tool or weapon for tasting, talking, lying. This next demi-sonnet is called Landline. I know many of us don't have landline phones anymore, but what's interesting is I can barely remember any of the numbers of my closest friends and family members anymore because they're all stored in my phone, but I can still remember my childhood landline number. And think about that for a minute. Can you remember your landline number if you're old enough to have had a landline? Here's the poem. The phone number of my childhood home. Once I propped our rotary beast on my lap and asked the operator to connect me to my friend Beth. I said, she has red hair and a white cat and she can die from bee stings. 288-9041. 288-9041. If you dial it now, it rings and rings. This next demi-sonnet is called Safety Drill. In the event of an active shooter, run in zigzags behind the school, my daughter is told. It's harder to hit a moving target. Run across the field to the woods. Don't cower. But so many moving targets, so many wind-blown flowers. And this last demi-sonnet is called E. It's true we're drawn to things whose names begin with the same letter as our own. And you know what? I want to pause for a minute and explain where this poem comes from. I did read this study that said that we're naturally drawn to things that start with the letter of our first name. So, you know, my name starts with E. I'm maybe drawn to things that start with E. Think about that. What does your name start with? Are you drawn to things that start with that letter? It's kind of fun. So E. It's true we're drawn to things whose names begin with the same letter as our own. I, for one, love the elephant, lumbering elegy to an earlier era. And eggs, emergency red exit signs, the human ear. I love especially ephemera's epitome, the Etch-a-Sketch. Shake me up, watch me disappear. So those were very short poems, demi-sonnets, and I'm going to close by reading a long poem. It's 6 pages long, and it's in several different parts. And I should tell you just a few things about the poem before I read it. There are military terminology sections of the poem, and those are based on actual military terms. I didn't make those up. And the definitions are the actual definitions. The other thing I just want to tell you about this poem is that it's based on an actual experience. Part of it is something that happened to me with a former student of mine. Maybe the most personally meaningful experience I've ever had with a student that has stayed with me for a very long time. So I won't tell you anything more than that for now, but the poem is called Debriefing, a Poem in Parts. 1. My left leg. My left leg struts up the street in search of a full-bodied cup of cardamom coffee in a cafe where men in snug trousers talk with their eyebrows. My left leg lingers by grilled kebabs and blood-red pomegranate juice, by vendors unscrolling grates for late-night shoppers. On a late-night... Oh, sorry, see, I told you I might mess up. On a candle-lit veranda overlooking the Tigris, you'll find my leg engaged in a cutthroat game of backgammon, or caught up in the rapid-fire ticks of domino tiles. My left leg sits in Haraya Square with lovers who lick each other's ice cream cones as if they're kissing. My left leg has no idea what it's missing. 2. Language redeployment, beach party. Noun. A task organization charged with facilitating the landing and movement off the beaches of troops, equipment, and supplies. 3. 6 alternative uses for tampons. Squeegees for dusty night vision goggles. Nerf darts for slow days on rooftop patrol. Ornaments for Christmas cacti. Toys for flea-bitten alley cats. Makeshift spoons for MREs. Plugs for bullet wounds. 4. Language redeployment. Early spring. Noun. An anti-reconnaissance satellite weapon system. 5. At the reading. I am sitting. I am sitting at a poetry reading. I am sitting at a poetry reading beside my student. I am sitting at my poetry... I'm going to start this section over. And there goes a car. 5. At the reading. I am sitting. I am sitting at a poetry reading. I am sitting at a poetry reading beside my student. I am sitting at a poetry reading beside my student, an Iraq War veteran. I am sitting at a poetry reading beside my student, an Iraq War veteran who lost his leg. I am sitting at a poetry reading beside my student, an Iraq War veteran who lost his leg, and we are listening to another veteran read his poems about the war. My student is turning pages in his book, following along with each poem. My student is turning pages in his book, following along. My student is turning pages in his book. My student is turning pages. My student is turning. My student is turning. Mortar, the poet says. Mortar, the poet says, and I think of my student. Mortar, the poet says, and I think of my student thinking of his father. Mortar, the poet says, and I think of my student thinking of his father smashing his fist on the kitchen table at 2 a.m. I think of my student. I think of my. I think of what I think is mine, of what is his. Mortar, the poet says, and I think of how close it is to mortal. Mortar, the poet says, and I think of how close it is. 6. Language redeployment. Free play. Noun. An exercise to test the capabilities of forces under wartime conditions. 7. If you are reading this. If you are reading this, I wish I could hit rewind. If you are reading this, I guess it was a one-way trip. If you are reading this, Mom, don't be sad. If you are reading this, Dad, take care of Mom. If you are reading this, I have one request. Bagpipes and Amazing Grace. Okay, that's two. If you are reading this, Jake, you can have my truck, but don't ride the clutch, 'cause I'm watching you. If you are reading this, it was my time to go. If you are reading this, you already know. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, everyone.